I have another spooky story for you guys. This one was submitted by a woman who believes that she ran into what seemed like two small children while she was traveling home with her family late at night. But to this day, she's not exactly sure what approached her that night. Let's just get right into the story. My husband, son, and I were on our way home from a week-long vacation. Our son had fallen asleep in the back seat about an hour earlier, and my husband suggested we stop at the next rest area so he could stretch his legs and grab some coffee. It was late, well past midnight, and the highway was kind of creepy. It had thinned out to long, empty stretches of road. Thankfully, the rest stop was still open, but barely. Only a few cars were parked under the dim lights, and the building itself looked old and decrepit, like it hadn't been updated in decades. As soon as we pulled in, I felt the low-level discomfort that comes with stopping somewhere unfamiliar at night, but nothing alarming enough to mention. My husband went inside, leaving me in the car with our son while I checked my phone and waited. Everything was quiet until our son suddenly sat straight up in his car seat and started crying. I assumed he'd had a bad dream. He was 6 at the time and still prone to waking up confused in unfamiliar places. So I unbuckled myself and turned around to try and soothe him. But this wasn't the groggy, half-asleep crying that I was used to. He was wide awake, shaking and sobbing in a way that I had never seen before. His little hands clenched tight around the straps of his car seat. When I asked him what was wrong, he didn't answer. He just kept crying harder, gasping for breath like he couldn't calm himself down, no matter how much I tried to soothe him. After several minutes, I noticed movement near the edge of the parking lot. 2 children were standing near the tree line, just beyond the reach of lights. They looked to be about 10 or 11 years old, and they were dressed in dark clothes that blended almost entirely with the shadows. I thought they might be siblings who were just waiting around for their parents, but something about the way they stood still caught my attention. They weren't talking to each other, weren't shifting their weight or fidgeting the way kids normally do. They just stood there, facing our car. My son's crying escalated the moment I looked at them. He started screaming, his voice full of panic, kicking his legs and begging me to leave. I tried to calm him while telling myself not to overreact. But the closer the children drifted towards us, the harder it was to ignore the feeling that was pooling in my stomach. They approached slowly, stopping just outside the circle of light cast by our headlights. I cracked my window open slightly so I could ask if they needed help. One of them stepped forward and spoke in a voice that was flat and strangely formal for a child. "Can you help us?" he asked. "We need a ride." I felt nauseous almost instantly, like the air inside the car had thickened. I asked where their parents were, already reaching for the door locks without thinking. The other child tilted her head slightly and said they were close by, but didn't point or elaborate. My son was hysterical now, screaming into his seat and clawing at his straps. His face was red and wet with tears. He had turned his head away from the children and was inconsolable no matter what I said to him. When I asked what was wrong, he screamed, "Don't let them in. Please, don't let them in." The children took a couple more steps closer, still being careful to avoid the light. One of them started speaking again, more insistently this time, saying it would only be for a moment, that they were cold, that they just needed permission to get inside the car. The word permission sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cold night air. I noticed then that my nausea had grown into a full-blown headache, with pounding pressure behind my eyes, and my hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't make out what was on my phone screen. Everything in my body was telling me to leave. I tried to rationalize what was happening. These were just kids. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. I didn't want to be the kind of person who ignored children asking for help, but something in me just would not let me open that door. My husband came out of the building, and the moment the door closed behind him, the children stepped back away from the vehicle. They slowly moved further and further away from the car in what seemed like a slow glide. By the time my husband reached the car and asked what was going on, they were gone. Once we were back on the highway, I told my husband what happened. He tried to reassure me by suggesting that our son was just overtired or overwhelmed, and that the kids were probably waiting for their parents somewhere nearby. I nodded along, even though my hands were still shaking and my heart hadn't slowed down yet. However, my nausea and headache had completely subsided. Our son fell asleep almost immediately after we pulled away, as if nothing unusual had just happened. A few days later, after we'd returned home, I brought it up gently while my son and I were sitting together on the couch. I asked him if he remembered the kids we saw at the rest stop, careful not to sound alarmed or suggestive. His face changed the moment I mentioned them. He told me they were scary, and when I asked why, he said it was because of their eyes. I asked him what he meant. So he looked at me very seriously and said, "They were all black." I responded, "What do you mean they were all black?" He put his finger on my eyelid and said, "You have white eyes with green in the middle. They only had black in their eyes. No white." I felt my stomach drop. I asked him how he could tell, since it had been so dark and the children never stepped fully into the light. He shrugged and said he just knew. I didn't push him any further. I didn't want to put ideas in his head or make it worse by asking questions that I wasn't prepared to hear the answers to. But I still think about that moment sometimes, because I never saw their eyes myself. I never even got a clear look at their faces, and yet my son reacted to them with a level of fear that I've never seen before or since, like something in him recognized danger before his mind could understand it. I do want to know what you guys think about this story. Were these actual children looking for help, or were they possibly something else? Tell me your theories down in the comments, and don't forget to follow for the next spooky story.
Welcome back to another episode of Tea After Midnight. Just a little series where we have some tea to keep it nice and classy, but I also tell you scary stories. So if you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. Grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you a scary story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story comes from Holly. Hi Savannah, my name is Holly, and I have a few spooky stories for you. These all happened around my childhood home in rural southern Ontario. These stories may not be as spooky as the Appalachian stories you've told, but it is an experience that still haunts me. As long as I can remember, I've always been able to feel presences. I believe this started when I was around 2 years old. From the ages of 2 to 7, I would always tell my parents, sister, and babysitter that there was a man in my pillow. I would make a circle of my stuffed animals around me in bed to keep me safe from this pillow man. A little backstory of my childhood home. It was built sometime throughout the 1800s and is surrounded by forest, farm fields, and swamp, and it's very haunted. My parents and even guests have had creepy, unexplainable things happen in this house. My sisters and I would wake up with scratches and bruises covering our bodies, which along with other things caused my parents to bring in a priest to bless the house. This didn't work and only made things worse. They then turned to a medium to try and figure out what they were dealing with, and they were told that there were many different presences on the property and that they were angry. But going back to the pillow man part, I was getting tucked into bed one night and told my parents that they were being watched. Obviously, they questioned what I was meaning, thinking I was just making up stories in my 2-year-old brain. I proceeded to get out of bed and tell them there was a woman in my closet and mimicked how she was speaking to me. But then I told them about the man in the pillow and how his face was always contorted weird with a gaping mouth and spoke in a low growl tone, which I also mimicked. One of my older sisters was listening at this point, and she swears to this day that I was possessed. The sound that apparently came out of my mouth was so unexplainable and uncanny. This event happened in 2008. This is where this gets weird. My bedroom door was originally bare. There weren't any notches, just a plain wooden door, but after this occasion, a figure appeared on the bottom of the door. Although it may not look like much, it appeared overnight directly after my so-called possession. To me, this photo sends chills down my spine because the figure looks like a contorted face with an open, gaping mouth. This event is where I started seeing things that others could not see. Fast forward to the summer of 2020, my best friend at the time, who I'll call C, lived just down the road from me. And don't come for me about social distancing, we had sleepovers every night and we were essentially family. C and I were exploring our spirituality and had taken up meditation. I knew of this spot on our road that had a pond and almost a natural ramp up the side that brings you into the forest. My dad and I found this location while we were out picking up garbage one day, and I remember us finding a weird man-made landmarker, which we assumed was a grave for someone's pet. This location was about a 15-minute bike ride from my place, so we ventured out. We were planning on meditating and taking some photos of each other to later post on Instagram. We arrived around midday, and I found a small circle-like clearing in the forest about 30 feet away from the road. We both sat down and closed our eyes. About 2 minutes into meditating, I saw clear as day us in the forest surrounded by these trees, and through the trees I could see this tall, dark figure staring at us. I instantly felt uneasy and quickly got up and yelled at C that we needed to leave. I gave her a quick rundown about the creature I saw and the danger I felt that we were in. On our way back, I could feel that we were being watched and possibly followed. We knew we couldn't go to my house since my parents weren't home and the house was already creepy enough. So we went to her place even though her mom was not there. She was supposed to get home shortly from work. For some context, she lived in a double wide with 2 doors to get inside. One had a deadbolt and the other was a sliding door that did not have any form of latching or locking. We decided to try and distract ourselves from what just happened, which led us to getting all dressed up with makeup and jewelry. This did in fact distract us for a while. When we were done, it was dark outside. Since we had not gotten the chance to take pictures earlier, we thought now would be a good time. C said we should go outside to take some pictures on the road. After a few were taken, completely disregarding what had happened earlier, we started to hear sticks snapping and grass moving from the ditch line right beside us. Immediately we ran back to the house thinking that whatever we encountered earlier had followed us back. We got inside and locked the door. We tried to jimmy rig the sliding door with a broomstick so that it wouldn't open. C called one of our friends and we told her everything that had happened that day. I sent our friends the pictures we had just taken and she increased the brightness on them. In one photo of me, you could see a clear black outline of a creature on its hands, elbows stuck outwards, crawling in the ditch with these white eyes staring at us. The pure nausea I felt once we saw that was awful. I made a lock to her bedroom door out of a fork and a knife to try and keep us safe. Around 40 minutes had passed and we heard her mom get home. She came to C's bedroom and we let her in and she apologized for being late and that she needed to cover a coworker's shift. Then she proceeded to ask us why the sliding door was left wide open. Still to this day I cannot explain what we saw. I don't know if it was a shadow person or something else, but I know whatever it wanted from us was not good. To this day, I have sleep paralysis dreams about this creature, and I believe part of it is still following me. Holly, darling, I'm going to need you to send me an email and let me know why you think this thing is still following you. But I just keep going back to the beginning about the pillow man and the picture that she sent along with it. And if you're looking at this picture, you can clearly see that there is an open, wide, gaping mouth. That is actually terrifying. And to think that before that situation had happened that night, that door was completely fine. But then you're out in the woods and you see the creature that's standing out there staring at you and you think it followed you home. That sends shivers down my spine. But the biggest mystery of all is what opened that sliding door. Because you guys got home and you jimmy rigged the door to make sure it wouldn't open, and then it opens. And I need to know immediately what did that. But Holly, if you have any updates or more information you'd like to share, I know we all would love to hear it. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them, and they do not have to be about the Appalachian Mountains. You can send it to this email on the screen or the email in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have the best night. I love you, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Let's read another scary Reddit story. When I worked for a security company, I used to have to do nightly rounds in an old, dilapidated building, which used to be a newspaper printing press and journalist offices. Usually I would do these rounds around 3 or 4 a.m. The building was 5 stories, and on each level, there were small metal cylinders attached to walls and doorways, which necessitated the usage of a deggy stick, which I'd press onto the points, which registered to the main office to prove I was doing all 5 floors end to end. Some of the building was lit, as during the day, workers would be inside servicing the electric panels or tearing apart floors. When I did these rounds, nobody but me would be in the building. It had a cold chill inside at the time from the winter air. Walking through a large, abandoned building in dead silence, I admit was somewhat creepy. The smell was old and stale. Sometimes I'd hear strange noises, but nothing too serious. I felt generally comfortable in the building except on one floor, floor 3. One end of the floor was lit by an overhead light around the staircase, but the other end, which stretched a good 10 or 15 yards, was pitch black. Whenever I'd make my way down that hallway, which you could only go left, to another hallway, to which eventually led to an open room with short, segmented cubicle walls, previously an office floor, and on the other side, dark, opened bathrooms, which looked like something out of Silent Hill. I always felt uneasy. Extremely uneasy. That feeling some get when they say it felt like I was being watched? Yeah, that was me. One night while making my way through the darkness of that floor, I felt something touch the back of my neck. I swatted at it, thinking maybe a spider had landed on me, but no, nothing there. I shone my flashlight everywhere and found nothing. The hair stood up on my neck, and I made a run for it. I looked back behind me, ignoring the final deggy point I had to hit, which involved me walking the full stretch of the hallway through a door to another creepy dark room, hitting my point and going back to the eerie hallway and finally back to the light. And I swear I saw a shadowy mass moving near those dreaded bathrooms. Later on that night, I went to evaluate a guard at another site, who used to work in that building 4 years ago when it was functioning with employees. I started to tell him about that building. I said to him, "Yeah, I get weird vibes on," and he immediately interjected with, "the 3rd floor?" I was dumbfounded, and my creep meter shot so high it broke the glass. I asked him what he meant by that before revealing my story. He told me that a woman had unalived herself on that floor. Her husband had left her, and she got up from her desk, walked to the window, and leapt out, landing like a splattered pancake in the parking lot. Not long after, the women on that floor refused to stay past 4 o'clock, and they all avoided the bathrooms. They made claims of hearing voices and seeing shadows out of their peripherals, among other things. He used to do the rounds in that building during working hours, but one night he stayed late and did rounds after dark when everyone had left. He felt the same vibes, and he also claimed that on one night he shined a flashlight down in the direction of the bathrooms, and he saw a tall, black figure, slightly hunched over, standing in the hallway, back towards him, peeking over its shoulder. He bolted out and never went on that floor again, or at least near the bathrooms. To give some detail on why the bathrooms were so eerie, they were both next to each other and doorless. When I would shine my light into the pitch darkness, I'd receive back the glare of mirrors with stains splashed all over them, creepy porcelain white sinks, a white tiled floor, and shadows bouncing off the walls. If you haven't played it, I'd recommend going on YouTube and watching a clip of the hallway bathroom scene from Outlast 2. The corridors and bathrooms are strikingly similar to what I'm describing here. Just those images alone will give you goosebumps. Now, I knew psychologically I'd be fucked having to do rounds at this building, but I couldn't avoid it. Our company was contracted to have a guard walk the grounds twice a day. I got stuck with the night rounds. So you can imagine my next visit I was not looking forward to. It went on for several days with nothing eventful occurring. However, that feeling of dread wouldn't subside, only strengthen. Finally, one night, I worked up the courage and said out loud, "If anyone is in here, make your presence known now. Stop fucking with me." Nothing. I continued down the dark hallway, through the door into that dark room at the end, flashlight in hand, hit my point, and re-entered the hallway, passing the bathrooms and going to turn right into the dark, open cubicle area. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted rapidly, and I froze. I can't explain it, but I got this sinking feeling in me that something was right behind me. Now, I know that typically, when people give their accounts of seeing ghosts or demons, it's usually just tricks of the light or their own minds seeing something that isn't really there. But mentally, they somehow contort reality to fit their skewed beliefs that they're seeing something which is not there. Well, I've had that happen to me before, and this was not one of those instances. I was completely awake, engaged, and lucid. Hell, I'd never even really believed in the paranormal or the demonic. I was never religious. Anytime I thought I saw a ghost or spirit, I was able to conjure up a reasonable explanation. Believe me, I've tried over and over to rationalize what I'm about to tell you, but I just can't. I was as much of a skeptic as any scientist on Earth. What I was about to confront was absolute, formed, and not by any means a trick of the light or peripheral movement. I started to walk faster, praying to reach the end of the darkness. My gut told me, don't turn around, don't turn around. But I had to. I couldn't wonder anymore. So I turned. I looked behind me, into the darkness. I shuddered immediately and jumped back. What I saw was a black, deep black figure, darker than the darkest corners of the floor by far, with frizzy hair, tall, with arms much longer than a man's, and in the quickness of the situation, what looked like fingernails or claws. At first, I couldn't believe it. I thought maybe it was a tall, homeless man or woman hiding in the building. I even called out, "Hello?" I was frozen in place, my heart about to punch a hole through my breastbone. This thing, still and silent, bent down, got on all fours, and started running at me full speed. And the way it was taking its strides in that split second were short, but very fast movements, like a crippled dog chasing the mailman. I turned and sprinted so fast towards the exit door that I fell forward, slamming myself into the door. I opened it to run out, but turned around one last time and shone my flashlight directly back where I had encountered this thing. There was a beam that ran from the floor to the ceiling with a breaker box attached to it, and the door to the box was flapping back and forth, making banging sounds each time it hit the beam. I watched until it stopped. Something had slapped it. After this, I still had to do rounds on this building. I had no choice. It was my job. But from then on, I wore headphones, putting music on full blast, and I'd sprint from end to end. Weeks later, I stopped in the darkness and called out for whatever it was to leave, that I refused to communicate with it any further. To this day, since this happened, I've not encountered anything I'd call paranormal, but that night, that thing, I'll never forget. It was real, it was full of hate, and I'm convinced it wanted to hurt me or kill me.
This one was submitted by someone who encountered what seemed like an injured woman out on the road late at night. As the interaction went on, she started to realize that there was something very off about this woman and that she might not even be human at all. Let's get right into the story. I was driving home late one night, taking a long stretch of rural road that cut through open land and fields with no houses for miles in either direction. I had been down that road many times before, but I always hated how dark and eerie it was at night. As I was driving, I saw someone sitting on the shoulder ahead of me. She looked like a woman, curled slightly inward, one arm held close to her body as if it was hurt. Her hair hung forward, obscuring most of her face, and her clothes were dark enough that she almost blended into the road until my headlights caught her. I thought it was strange that she was just sitting there and wasn't trying to flag anyone down. Initially, I thought she was either hurt from a car accident or possibly on some sort of substance. I eased off the gas and rolled closer. My instincts were pulling me in opposite directions. I didn't like stopping on roads like that at night, but the idea of driving past someone who might be injured really bothered me. I cracked my window a bit and asked her from the road if she was okay. She lifted her head and looked toward the car and said, very calmly, "Can you help me?" Her voice was steady and sounded kind of rehearsed, like she was repeating something that she'd practiced. It didn't carry the panic and pain I would have expected from someone who was hurt and alone. I looked for her car, but there wasn't one. So I asked her what happened. She told me that she'd fallen and couldn't walk very well. Then she asked me to pull over so she could come closer to talk to me. The way she phrased it made me weary. She didn't ask for a phone or even tell me where she was heading. So I told her I could call someone for her, that I could stay right where I was and to help that way. But she shook her head slowly, like that wasn't really the answer that she wanted. I finally told her that I would call 911 and have an ambulance come and get her. I don't think she liked that very much because she responded, "Please help me, Mel." My name is Mel. Specifically, it's the name my family calls me. No one outside of my family or very close friends even knows that I go by that name. The sound of her saying my name like that made my hands go cold on the steering wheel. There was no reason for her to know it, and yet she said it with the same tone that my sister used when she wanted me to listen. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Is it possible that I know this woman from somewhere? But I definitely didn't know her. My heart was pounding, and I realized I double-checked that my doors were locked without consciously doing so. She started to shift slightly, angling herself towards the car, but she never stood up. She stayed right where she was, just outside the reach of the headlights, her face still partially hidden. When she spoke again, her voice sounded different. This time, she spoke in my mother's voice, soft and disappointed. "Remember how you used to say you wanted to be a doctor when you were little so you could help people?" She said it as if it was still a part of who I was, like it was proof that stopping was the right thing to do. She continued to talk about things that I had said or done as a child. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was obviously trying to manipulate me with things from my childhood that only someone close to me would know about. As she spoke, she slowly shifted forward, as if she were testing how much she could move without breaking the shape that she was wearing. The voice stayed warm and familiar, but the way she moved made it clear that whatever was speaking to me didn't need help at all. It was only trying to see how close I would let it get. I told her again that I couldn't get out of the car and that help was on the way, even though I hadn't actually called anyone yet. She tilted her head, listening, and for a moment, it seemed like she was considering something. Then she said, "It would be easier to help if you let me come close to you." Something about that sentence made the next choice clear. I don't know why, but up until this point, I felt stuck in that spot like I was in some sort of a light trance that suddenly broke. I didn't argue or explain myself. I just mashed the accelerator and drove off as fast as I could. My pulse was pounding loud enough that it drowned out the sound of the road. I told myself not to look in the rearview mirror, but I couldn't help myself. When I looked back, I saw that the shoulder of the road was empty where she had been sitting. Then, just before the road curved out of sight, I saw her again, standing upright in the middle of the street. Suddenly, I heard a loud screech that I can only describe as a banshee scream. Once I was far enough away to feel safe, I called 911 to report her. I drove the rest of the way home with my jaw clenched and my shoulders tight, half expecting to see someone behind me every time I checked my mirrors. But thankfully, nothing followed me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was shaking from the realization that the woman was probably not even human, and it almost got me. There are a lot of stories about supernatural beings like mimics and skinwalkers where I live, but this was the first time I'd experienced something like that. I still get chills every time I tell the story or think about what could have happened if I'd gotten out of the car or allowed it to approach me. So what do you guys think she encountered on that road? Now, she already mentioned mimics and skinwalkers, but I'm curious if you guys have any other possibilities for what she might have encountered. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow for the next spooky story.
তুমি কিন্তু আমার একটা ভিডিও কল করো না সোনিয়া অ্যাঞ্জেল সোনিয়া
তুমি কি শুরু করছো?
আরে আমি করলামটা কি? আমি যেখানে বয়ে আছি।
এই আমার ফোন দাও দাও কইতাছি
ছাড়ুম না।
কি দাও ছাড়ো কইতাছি আমার ফোন দিব না আমি
এইটা আমগো খানদানি রীতি তুই বুঝছ না
আব্বা গতকালকে রাত্রে বেলা এমন সেটিং দিছি।
আব্বা ফোন দিয়ে কি করেন আপনি?
এই কথা কই গান শুনি এই আর কি
বাস এই দুইটা কামের জন্য
হায় হায় করছে কি আমার খানদানির ইজ্জতের ফালুদা খেয়ালাইছে
তোবা তোবা, কস কি এত বড় বদ জামাই
হারামজাদায় আমার মা।
শাহজাহান
শাহজাহানের চাচাতো বাগান হুগে গেছে গা।
শাহজাহান হুনো না,
কও
বুঝার পারলাম না, বাড়ি মারলা আমারে, কান্দলা আমি কাঁদুম, তুমি কাঁদতাছো কেলা?
তারপর
তারপর আর কি? সারা রাত কই আসলো, কি করছে আমি জানি না, আমার লাগে কেউ।
আপনি তো আপনার শ্বশুর বাড়িতে গিয়ে ঠিকই হ্যাঁ নিয়ম কানুন অক্ষর অক্ষরে পালন করছেন, আর আমারতে আয়া মিছা গপ।
তুমি কি কইবার লাগছো এগুলা? তোমার কি মাথা আউট হয়ে গেছে নি? এত বড় স্পর্ধা আমার আদেশ।
আর আমি যে তোর রুমে আইছি, রাইতে ঘুমাইছি,
তুমি বাসে আসার পর থেকে আমাকে বাসে শান্তি সব চলে লাগেছে।
আয় হায়, খাইছে করছোটা কি তুমি?
তুমি একটা ভিডিও কল করে পাঠাও প্লিজ, প্লিজ। কবে আমগো দেখা
করছেনটা কি এটা আব্বার লগে? এমন চিপা মাইটা দিয়েছেন, কেমন খানদান বউ?
তারপর তো ভয় কাচে মুচু খায়া গেছে গা, তারপর আবার দুর্নাম করতে হইব। এই তোর কি
এটা তো দামি ফোন।
আইসা বাপ জান, রাইতে ঠিকঠাক মতো ঘুমাইছে তো নাকি বাসায় গিয়া আব্বাজান রে কইবেন?
কি করছো যে এটা তুই? বাজার রে বাজার যাও চুইছে আজকাই করছে।
সম্মান সব পাঞ্চার করে দিছে।
মাগার দোষ আমারও আছে, আমি একটু বেশি বাড়াবাড়ি করে ফেলছি। চলো না আমরা বাড়িতে ফিরে যাই।
তুমি কি পাগল হয়ে গেছো নি? এটাই আমার বাড়ি এখনতে।
চৌধুরী সাহেবের সাথে আমি কি কথা কইছি? তুমি কোনো কথাই কই নাই কে? সাজান তোমারে কইলো এত
দিচ্ছেন, হ্যাঁ দিচ্ছেন না? এলা বাইরন, আমার বাড়িতে বাইরন।
একবারে হাসা করছেন আব্বাজান, আপনার পোলার এই বাড়ি থাকা কোনো বিতলামি করলে আমি তোরা গাড়াই, কিন্তু ভাবলাম আপনি তো একমাত্র পোলা, গাড়াইলে আবার দিলে চোট পাই।
দিতাছো তুমি?
শোনো, তোমাগো খানদানে যেমন কিছু নিয়ম আছে, আমাগো খানদানেও আছে।
এইসব ফাত্রা নিয়ম কেউ যেন জানবার না পারে, মনে থাকবো তো? তোর যে নতুন বাবি, ফাইনাল ডিসিশন লয়ে লইছি, আজকে রাতে কিন্তু আপনার লগেই ঘুমাবো।
আমার লগে কেন বাজান আপনি আমার লাগে ঘুমাইবেন কেন?
জিন্দেগি তুই এইটা আর পোষাইতে পারবি না বাজার, তোর আমি সাজিয়ে দিতাছি তুই জলদি।
ক্যাচে লাগাইছে।
মা তুই এক কাম কর, জামাই লইয়া শ্বশুর বাড়ি জাগা। হন মা, শ্বশুর
এই তো একেবারে বাঘের বাচ্চা।
ফুদি দে।
আচ্ছা বাঘের মতন যাবি।
আমি কইতাছি ওখানে খুইলা আসো নালে আমি টাইনা ছিড়া ফেলামু কইলাম।
আমার খানদানি পোশাক তুমি টাইনা ছিঁড়া ফেলাইবা?
আমার ফোন দাও।
কোনি বড়া আমারে কইছো বন্ধুর লগে কথা কও, তুমি তো এঞ্জেল সোনিয়ার লগে কথা কও কি?
তারপর বউরে দিয়া হাত পাটি পাইছে, এর বাদে বউরে কইছে পানি লয়ে আহো, বউ পানি লয়ে আইছে, এই পানি দিচ্ছে ফালায়া।
আম্মা আব্বা রুটি সুরত দেখছেন? রুটি এরকম তেরে বাগা কেলা, হ্যাঁ রুটি সুন্দর। আব্বা আমারে না হয় তুমি বুঝাইলা, তুমি তোমার খানদানের কি বুঝাইবা, আমার আত্মীয় স্বজনের কি বুঝাইবা?
আমি দুঃখিত।
বইয়ের হাতে মার খাওয়া চলে, তাই কিছু কই নাই কা।
আমাগোর খানদানে জামাই মারনের নিয়ম নাইকা।
তুই আমার এখান থেকে যাবি না মানে কি? অক্ষণ তুই বেরোবি।
আব্বা
কুইলজা কাঁপে না?
ওই বেটা ওই তোর কইলজা কাঁপে না মিছা কথা কইতে, হ্যাঁ হারাম খোর জানি কোনানকার।
মাগার মারামারিতে 1 নম্বর।
আমি পারি। এখন মনটা চাইতেছে তোমার কান্দের উপর চড়ায় একটা আসান মারি।
ঠিক আছে ভাই, তাহলে আমার মুখ চুপ বন্ধ থাকবো, আর কেউ আমি কিছু কমু না, মুখে কষ্টি।
এখন লাইনে আইছস।
Gather round, because I have another spooky story. The story was submitted by someone who believes that the man her mother has been dating is not just controlling and emotionally draining. She believes that he might actually be something much more dangerous and a lot less human. Let's get right into the story. My mom has been with her boyfriend for over a decade now. When she first introduced us, I remember thinking how charming he was. The kind of person who made a point to remember small details about everyone he met and used them to make you feel seen. When they first started dating, my mom seemed happier than I'd seen her in years. It felt like she'd found someone who brought her back to life. But that version of him didn't last. Over the years, the charm thinned out. He became quieter, more withdrawn, and less interested in anyone outside of my mom. Family dinners became rare, and holidays were suddenly inconvenient. When he did show up, he watched conversations more than he participated in them. His attention was always drifting back to my mother, as if he needed to keep her within reach. But what really bothered me was how much my mom changed. She became distant and oddly subdued, like her emotions had been dulled. She stopped laughing the way she used to and seemed tired all the time. Not just physically, but in a deeper, heavier way. Within just a few years, she looked dramatically older. Her face weathered and her posture slumped, as if the life had slowly been drained out of her. People who hadn't seen her in a while would comment on how different she looked, asking if she was sick or just under a lot of stress. She always insisted that she was fine. Her boyfriend, on the other hand, never changed. No new lines appeared on his face. His hair never thinned or grayed. Even his posture stayed the same, upright and alert, in a way that felt unnatural for someone who was supposed to be aging alongside her. Family meals were another thing. He always insisted on cooking when we visited, making elaborate dishes that smelled incredible, but he never actually ate with us. He would sit at the table, push food around his plate, take sips of wine, and eventually excuse himself without finishing. Sometimes the plates would be cleared later, his food still untouched. If anyone commented on it, he'd smile and say he had a sensitive stomach, or that he'd already eaten earlier. The explanation changed often enough that I just stopped keeping track. The moment that shattered any remaining sense of normalcy came when I found old photos. I was helping my mom clean out a closet one afternoon when I opened a box of albums that she hadn't looked at in years. Mixed in with pictures from my childhood were older photos that I didn't recognize. Black and white and faded color prints from decades earlier. In several of them, her boyfriend was there, and he looked exactly the same. The photos were dated over 40 years ago, and across different pictures, he appeared beside 2 women that I didn't recognize, each identified in handwriting on the back as his wife at the time. I later learned that both women had passed away years earlier from undisclosed illnesses. My mom said she knew that he had been previously married, and she confirmed that the names of those women were the names of his previous wives. After that, I began to inspect his behavior more thoroughly. He never went out during the day unless he absolutely had to, and when he did, he complained about the light as if it physically bothered him. The curtains in the house were always drawn, even on cloudy days, and he insisted on low lighting indoors. It felt as though his body was calibrated for nighttime. I caught myself thinking of the word vampire one evening and immediately felt ridiculous for even considering it. I didn't believe in things like that, but still, once the idea surfaced, it was hard to push it back down. He never aged and he never ate. He seemed to thrive while my mother visibly deteriorated. And most unsettling of all, the people he had loved before her were all gone, while he remained exactly the same. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore how neatly the pieces fit together once I allowed myself to look at them that way. The fact that I could even think this way made it clear that, vampire or not, he was not good for my mom. That was when we started trying to get her away from him. My siblings and I suggested trips, dinners, and even staying with us for a while. She declined every time, refusing to go anywhere without him. When we insisted, her responses became strange, repetitive, and detached, as if she were reciting something rather than speaking from her own thoughts. She insisted he loved her and that she was fine. Her voice sounded flat when she said it, lacking the warmth that it used to carry. I was visiting one afternoon when her boyfriend was in the kitchen preparing food. I heard him curse sharply, and I turned to see blood dripping from his hand onto the counter. The cut was deep enough that it should have required stitches. I panicked and insisted that he go to the hospital, grabbing paper towels and trying to apply pressure to the wound. He pulled his hand away calmly and told me he was fine. 2 days later, when I saw him again, his hand wasn't bandaged. There was no cut, no mark of any kind. I commented on it without thinking, and the look he gave me was the first time I felt genuine suspicion that something about him really wasn't right. His expression turned alert, as if I had noticed something that I wasn't supposed to. He claimed that he had never actually been cut, and that the knife slipping only made him think that he was injured. But that was a lie. I saw the blood dripping from his hand and cleaned it up myself. After that, he became more controlling of my mom's time and more distant towards me. Visits stopped entirely, unless he was present, and eventually, even phone calls became rare. Now, when I do see my mother, she feels far away, like she's only partially there. She speaks slowly, avoids eye contact, and just generally looks exhausted. Standing next to him, she resembles a woman 20 years older than she should be, while he remains unchanged. We've tried everything we can think of to get her out of that house, but she refuses to leave him. And I think it's because she physically can't. Okay, so what do you think is really happening? Is this just a simple case of emotional manipulation and gradual isolation that maybe just feels supernatural? Or is the submitter's instinct right, that her mom is essentially trapped in a relationship with something that is feeding off of her? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments, and don't forget to follow for the next